the ZiiGaat XJ's Audio ESTRELLA. Let's talk about it. All right, before we get too deep into this collab, this is not my collab. This is Jay's Audio's collab. This is the Jaytis channel, right? The Jaytis channel. Jaytis is the name of a D&D character I had when I was a kid. Jay's Audio collab. Jaytis, me. So, now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about this IEM. This is a very hyped release. Jay's has claimed that this IEM competes with all IEMs under 1,000 and is one of the best out there. We're going to talk about whether that claim is true or not, but there's been a lot of hype, a lot of talk about this. But before we get too deep into the sound, let's get into the build quality accessories, and then we'll get into some sound talk. All right, the tips. They're not too exciting. This is all you get. One set of yellows and some foamies. This is the case. The case is cool. I mean, it's a typical case. It's the same case you get in the Jupiter. It's a nice case. I like the feeling of it. It's kind of like leather, but it's kind of hard. It's a good protective case, and I like it. The shell is a nice shell. It is, it's bigger than the Magic 1. It's dainty. It's light. It fits in ear well, but not super well. It doesn't have that nice little wing lip on the end that makes it sit really well. Its nozzle is reasonable in length, and it's easy to keep ear tips on this. I like the look and feel of this, but I mean, it's, like I said, if it had that lip, it'd be better. I think the shell design is objectively very beautiful. I like the design of this. I think it's one of my favorite designs, and it looks very good. The cable. The cable is kind of a mixed bag. Like, I like juicy, chunky, thick cables. This is kind of a thin cable, but it's durable, it's sturdy, it's light, so it doesn't bother you. It has a functioning chin slider, a nice little Y split. It's, it's a decent cable, but it's not something that's too fantastic. Packaging overall is just kind of okay. But how does this sound? Good. Really good. It's a very interesting IEM that I don't think was made for somebody like me. But still listening to it, it has this sense almost of, like, I had to compare this to a headphone, it would be like the Dan Clark E3, which I owned for about 6 months before I sold. It has this presence of strong, impactful bass, with mids kind of being a little bit even kiltered to add more space to the sound. So it's a very strong sound. It's a very beautiful IEM with a unique tuning. I think it's very clever. But let's get into some comparisons at this moment and look at some graph. Now, if we look at the graph, it fits my target fairly well. Like, it has a nice amount of bass shelf, a little bit of extra bass here. Like, someone wanted me to compare this to the Annihilator, and I didn't put it up there. But let's look at that right now real quick. You'll notice it has the same kind of bass kilter as the Annihilator. But what dips is the main difference here. Past 4K, it kind of dips and pitters out. But it's first, from 1 to 4K, it's very similar, and it has a very nice tonality. The bass shelf is right. Its mids are a little bit not to my liking. Like, I like this a little bit lower, kind of like on the Annihilator, but it's not without merit. We're gonna talk a little bit more about later. But what it does is kind of add this sense of soundstage to the presentation and does some things well. I don't love it more than the Annihilator, but it's also much cheaper, and it's something to note as we go. So we're going to look at some of the ZiiGaat IEMs and a bunch of other IEMs. I put up a post on YouTube to try to get, people to think what IEMs they wanted me to compare this to. Some of ones are ones that I don't have. Some are ones that I haven't quite reviewed yet. But we'll do the ones that we can, that I've actually ranked and graphed here. So the first one I want to talk about is the ZiiGaat C-Note. I like talking about ones from the brand first. I didn't like the ZiiGaat C-Note. It was way too flat and even kiltered. It was a little bit bland. It didn't have the space and air and dynamics. It wasn't necessarily terrible, but it was something that I quickly decided that it wasn't for me. It was something I was looking for something else at the time when I bought it and demoed it, and I just didn't like it. Personally, I think the ESTRELLA is a lot better set. Obviously, it's 3 times the price or even more depending on sales. But I think Jay's ESTRELLA does a better job than the C-Note. And just on a raw standpoint of what's better, the ESTRELLA by a lot. A lot of people did ask me to look at the RTET from Fresh Reviews. I did not get that one in. I decided to put my focus in on other channels. I've seen some good reviews of the RTET from people that I really like ATech and Gadgetry Tech. I consider both those guys friends and good people and give honest reviews. So I just really didn't see a point in reviewing that one at this point. But if I had to review them, to me, from what I've seen from graphs, the ESTRELLA has a little bit more dynamics. But then again, we're just talking graphs, so I can't really say much about the RTET other than that. If we look up the chain, the Jupiter. I love the Jupiter. I think the Jupiter is a great IEM. You'll notice they both have really nice base shelves. The Jupiter kind of has this similar approach to kind of upper mids, but it's just a little bit less, which really just makes the bass more pronounced. And I think the Jupiter is a better IEM. I think there's better tunings and it has better extension with better drivers, but it's also much more expensive. And I think the ESTRELLA gives you maybe a similar tune or a presentation that's also impressive for an impressively low price, and that's something to remember. If you look at some other ones like the Das 5, I like the Das 5. I thought the Das 5 had great bass. It was very V-shaped, and we're going to look at some other V-shaped IEM, but for me, the Das 5 was just a little bit too V. It was a little bit too hazy. I think Jay's ESTRELLA kind of splits the middle and it has a little bit less haze and it's a little bit cleaner and it has a more fresh presentation than the Das 5. But if you're not sensitive to this 4 to 6K region, the Das 5 might be a better choice as it's cheaper and it has good bass. And that's kind of one thing I like about the Das 5 is it has great bass, and the ESTRELLA has that same style of bass, and I really like it. It's really impressive bass and extremely fun. Like if we look at the ZiiGaat EM10, you'll notice that this is a lot more V-shaped, but what kind of happens is that ZiiGaat EM10 can come across slightly bright, but it has nice bass, it has nice upper mids, but the upper air and the extension of the ESTRELLA and just kind of the overall sound profile of the EM10 can kind of come across a little bit bright and a little bit too much at times, whereas the ESTRELLA has a way to kind of balance that out and have a more smooth, even kilter. I think the issue with the ESTRELLA is that it kind of combines a lot of other good IEMs, like, you know, if you want to look at, no, not that one, the Syncotrace. With the Syncotrace, it kind of has the nice upper mids and air, and the ESTRELLA kind of captures some of that upper air mids with a unique presentation and a better bass shelf. So even though it's a little bit more expensive than the Syncotrace, what it kind of does is combine some of the best properties of the Syncotrace and the Das 5 into one IEM that's just better. I just think it's just a fantastic IEM. But again, it's not going to be for everybody, and that's something to note. It does have a little bit of a unique tuning and some caveats that I wanted to talk about that might make this IEM something to be questionable of if this is something you're concerned about. So as we look at other IEMs, let's go up the chain. The Super Mix. People ask to see the Super Mix. The Super Mix is very similar to the EM10, but I don't think its drivers are as good. It just doesn't feel as impactful. I like the Super Mix, but it's kind of one of those IEMs that's a little bit hit or miss. Like when it hits very well, but it's also sensitive, and there's been some people that have reported problems with cables. I sold mine, and when I did, I actually included a second cable just because I was worried about that. I had some problems with the stock cable. And so I think the Super Mix is one of those funny IEMs that I think is a good IEM, And if it works for you, it can be a really great bargain. But I think the problem is that sometimes it doesn't come across well. It also does come across a little bit bright and doesn't have the upper mids approach that I personally would really encourage and kind of go for most people. If we go up the chain, the next one is kind of hard, the Dyna Quattro. The Dyna Quattro is one of my favorite IEMs and kind of my go-to at 300. And it's interesting because these trade blows and have certain things about them that are good and bad. The Dyna Quattro, to me, has a more rich, organic sound, almost like an 80s kind of rock concert, almost like a, like an old speakery sound, just tiny, very little bit, but it has a little bit more pronounced upper mids, a little bit more impactful bass. Its tonality and timbre is slightly different. But the Estrella just sounds more natural, more even kiltered. It has a better space of sound and space around you. Whereas the Dyna Quattro is just really pleasing and really well tuned. It lacks in some technicalities, but if you want to just talk tuning, in some ways the Dyna Quattro would consider to be very good and what a lot of people would go for. So it's kind of like if you're looking at something where like the tuning of the Dyna Quattro is something that I love a lot. But the air and extension on it are just not perfect, and it's hard for the IM to get a good fit. So I mean, the Estrella wins out on a lot of things. The Dyna Quattro wins out on having really good bass, really good mids, but the Estrella does a lot of other things better. Like it does space very well, has upper air and extension very well, and it's just an overall nice sounding IEM that I think is a little bit more pleasing to most people. Again, you got to know budget, but budget no aside, what's better? The Estrella. But it's close, and preferences to people that really want something that's kind of JM1-y to this 5K peak, and it really are like a mid-head, the Dyna Quattro will probably be my go-to-you if that's what you're concerned for. So the next one to look at is the Jazeera 61T. I think the Jazeera 61T is a fine set. It's a very inoffensive set, and it comes across very even kiltered, but it doesn't really do a whole lot special. It's kind of just like, it's a beautiful set with a strong tonality, but it's not especially special. I think the Estrella does something unique in tuning, which justifies for people that own a lot of sets. I think the Estrella presents itself in a way that it shows added value. Whereas the Jazeera 61T, while it's a nice set, it's not bad. It's significantly cheaper. Its tonality and timbre and just overall characteristics are just kind of okay. It's just kind of a fine set, but it doesn't really do anything super special, despite it being a strong and a nice and a fun set for people that like it. I do think it is a good set, but I think the Estrella is an amazing set. Like the Jazeera 61T, I think it's more like one of those sets that's it's worth the price, but the Estrella is probably maybe a little bit underpriced. Another one to look at is the Hype 4. I mean, the Hype 4 has the better, this kind of, 3-ish K peak, upper mids. It has a little bit declined bass shelf. It's, I personally like the Estrella's bass better, the air and extension. I had some weird sibilant issues in the upper air of the Hype 4. The Hype 4 is really good, but it's expensive, and it's one of those sets that it doesn't really do anything special. Like, it doesn't have this special tune. It just has a nice solid tune that does it well. And I kind of wish that there were something else. Like, I kind of wish the Hype 4 didn't have such like these weird treble issues for me. I wish it had just a little bit better bass. Again, the Estrella has better bass. It does some things really, really well, and it's a really fun set. All right, we look at other things. Another one people wanted to compare this to is the Mega 5 EST. The Mega 5 EST is a funny set. A lot of people have described it as like pure water. It's almost so boring that you'll listen to it like, okay, but nothing sounds bad on it, but nothing sounds really good on it. Now, I did just get a Mega 5 EST bass. I'll have that review out in a few days. And I do think that's a really fine set, and I'll talk about that in a comparison to the ESTRELLA versus the Mega 5 EST bass in that video. But for me, like, you know, the Mega 5 EST, while it's a really good set, it's just so plain, and it doesn't do anything interesting or beyond what I think other sets would do. It's just so kind of blarg, so uninteresting, and not super engaging. That's kind of my concern about it. Another person asked for the theoretical Mark II, and to me, the Mark II just comes across as a little bit boring. It lacks bass. It just kind of has this approach where nothing seems really clean, nothing really pristine. I mean, the Theato Audio MK3, it does have the EST drivers, and so it does have times where it sounds really good. But like, after a while, it just kind of sounds a little bit blargy, a little bit boring, a little bit just kind of there. It has some nice qualities about it, but it doesn't have anything super fancy. The ESTRELLA has great bass, has a great sense of space and air, and it also has nice drivers, and it's also half the price. I personally really like the ESTRELLA, and I think that's the better way to go, not only from a price standpoint, but I just feel like the Monarch Mark II doesn't really... It's just a safe tune, and that's kind of my concern. Next one I want to show is the Dusk. Now, I like the Dusk. I'm kind of mixed on it. And I've listened to it with certain types of music, and it does extraordinarily well. But the problem with the Dusk is in its default state is it's almost like a flat line. It has a very slight bass boost, very slight mid boost, and it just kind of sounds okay. It has nice treble, but it's really like an IEM that I felt was meant to be added to DSP. I think people are going to like the Dusk, and if you're looking for a neutral set, like if you just want something that's plain, you know, even more plain water than the Mega 5 EST, the Moondrop Critical Dusk might be a better set for you, but it just kind of depends. It's just kind of dull, kind of boring. Where the ESTRELLA gets you going. It's feet tapping. There's an engaging presence to its sound that's unique and special. Here's the Pilgrim. You can see the ESTRELLA has better bass than the Pilgrim. There's similar kind of a flow to parts of their upper mids from this 3 to 6K. I mean, it's kind of close depending on what you want. But I personally just like the ESTRELLA better. It has that better bass shelf. It kind of has a better upper mid presence. Like it takes what the Pilgrim did, and it amps up the areas that it needed to do. Like it's almost like copying someone's own work and making it better. Like it took this, it added the extra bass shelf, it added a little bit more energy to 4K, which really helps the space and air around it. And I think it just kind of does some things better at a cheaper price. I think that's an impressive feat. Nothing to take away from the Pilgrim, but it's just kind of, it's a little bit more neutral. It's a little bit kind of underwhelming in the upper mids. And that's kind of its fault. This is a good one. The Da Vinci versus the ZiiGaat Jay's Audio ESTRELLA. Now, the Da Vinci has a nice tune, but there was something about the bass that I mentioned in my review. I've mentioned it on my ranking list that I feel like it's supposed to have good bass, but it doesn't go far enough for me for the bass to be good. I think, the Da Vinci has this presence of almost being clean water, but then every once in a while, like once every 10 tracks, it just wigs out and does some odd things that I don't absolutely love. I mean, the Da Vinci's it's packaged better. It has that nice case, has a really nice cable, has better ear tip accessories. The faceplate, that's kind of objective. I think it's about the same, but some people might like the Da Vinci better. But as far as this approach to mids and how it sounds, the Da Vinci like I said, on a few tracks, it comes across just bad for me and not right for me. And that's kind of a problem that, like, while generally a good tuned IEM and very safe, it doesn't have this dynamic punch that I want it to have. And that's kind of one of the issues that I have with that IEM. Now we're talking J's versus J's. We're gonna use his graph for this, but we're talking about how is the tape mod. The tape mod's surprisingly good. I'm not gonna give it too much. I'm not gonna rank it fully, but I wanna say if you're worried about this having too much bass, throw on the tape mod. It's super nice. It's a little bit cleaner, has a nice pristine chill sound, which I think will work with some music and some vocals. The tape mod, it's good. It's a really legit tuning, and I think it's very clever of him to add additional value in a different tune that has just a little bit different bass, and I think that's the main thing that it changes. A little bit less upper mids, and like I said, the tape mod's very nice, and I recommend if you get the ESTRELLA to try it, because I think there's some people that are gonna like it even better. So now we go up the chain. And the ESTRELLA is a special set. I like it. But when you compare it to some other sets that, they should be better, price sometimes in audiophilia land, it's all preference and drivers and a few other things, but it's not always safe to say that a more expensive IEM is better. Like something like the Monarch Mark II, tons of energy up here, kind of a bassy set, extremely fatiguing. And that's kind of my problem with the Monarch Mark III. It's almost that it has too much detail. It sounds unnatural, and I just don't prefer it over the ESTRELLA. I think you're better off with that. A couple other ones, the Dunu Mirai. Now, the Dunu Mirai, it disappointed me. I felt like if you look at Precog's, his tune, I think he purposely did something with a little bit less sub bass, and I feel like it lacks sub bass and is kind of drab in that regard. It came across bright to me, and so the brightness of the Dunu Mirai and its weird oblong shell did not really work for me, and I didn't really prefer the Dunu Mirai. I don't know. I think, well, it's a good IEM. I think J's Audio ESTRELLA is better. It does a lot of great things. It has this unique sense of space about it that's almost like a little bit of a mix in between like that JM1 and a V shape, and it gives a sense of space. So the last one I kind of wanted to show was this U4S. This is also like $1,000 set, but you notice it kind of has this peaky cat ear style treble like that the U4S has. And like where it has this kind of increased presence region, which I think a lot of people are gonna like. Like the fans of the U4S, I think the ZiiGaat J's Audio ESTRELLA kind of provides that additional sense of space, and it's pretty cool. It's an interesting approach of how it all works. I think it has an increased bass shelf, and the bass shelf is a lot of fun. It adds an easy mod to be able to give you some different tunings, and I think it's a really strong set for people to consider. So, J's ESTRELLA, how does it do? After lots of days of testing and multiple hours of this thing, extremely well. Doing lots of A/B tests, I'm very impressed of what this IEM can pull. I'm giving it a strong score of a 9.5 for bass. Although its bass isn't perfect, it does do some good things. I think its tone of the bass is really good. I think its mids are lacking. I think it has great highs. I think its technicality, like some of the imaging and some of the soundstage of it, all like the soundstage is really good, but like the imaging and like the resolution of it does feel a little bit clouded, maybe from that 4 to 6K region. But overall, I think this is a very solid set for what it does. It hits a lot of the markers that I would want in an IEM. It sounds really good. It does a lot really well. And the thing about it is that it doesn't have a lot of quirks or weird issues. I think it's one of the better sets under 1,000. But I mean, if you look at stuff like the Hype 10, I think that's probably a better set. There's a few other sets that I have coming up that I think might be able to hold a candle to the ESTRELLA, because I don't think the ESTRELLA is perfect, but it's unique and it's special. So, is this the best set under 1,000? No, but it's pretty close. It does a lot of things really, really well. I think it has a fun sound, I think a beautiful shell. I think it's gonna be competitive. You know, this is a preference-based hobby. Calling something the best is a little bit outrageous. But does this do a lot of things well, to the point that it doesn't have any major, massive faults to what I personally would want out of an IEM? No, it doesn't. I think, you know, for its price, I think it's a good value. I think it's something that people should consider. I think maybe the packaging isn't exactly what I would want. I think it's not the best packaging at its price. But then again, you don't buy an IEM for its packaging. You buy an IEM for the sound and for the presentation of it. And I think this IEM is a really solid IEM. It does a lot of things well, and it has a very clever, amazing tuning. And I'm happy to be able to share this with you guys today. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. You're still here. It's over. Go home. Go watch another IEM video. It's done. That's the entire video. What more do you want?